Mina kuthiwa ngu-Effie ngwasenkayi. Umama confirmed ukuthi ngwakoNcube. I don't have any dispute with that. So I look at the fact ukuthi abantu bakoNcube banjani, very intelligent and I qualify there. So there is no way anything can succeed ingela muntu wakoNcube phakathi andlani selikwazi khona lokho. Thank you very much to the moderator. Thank you for the invitation. It's an opportunity to share with you. In my daily life, my responsibility is to fight for your rights, for my rights and the rights of every person, whether they are children, whether they are women, whether they are reporters, the media, or anyone, wherever there is a potential rights violation, I take it as my responsibility to fight and ensure there is justice and fairness. But my responsibility today is to share with you, from a civil society standpoint of view, how civil society gets to be involved, what will be the roles of civil society in fighting or in combating misinformation. The concepts have already been explained, the differences between misinformation and disinformation, fake news and the like, so my work is cut out. But I want to start with a theme for my presentation, and for the theme, since I'm talking about civil society, and civil society is organized communities, be they religious organized communities or media organized communities or culturally organized communities, and in any event where there is an organization that is non-state actor, that becomes part and parcel of civil society. And my theme today, in order to capture the roles of civil society and how it can play, how it can participate in combating misinformation, is taken from a judgment of the Supreme Court of the United States. Writing for the majority decision in a case that involved the issues of the media, the freedom, the circulation of information, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, Anthony Kennedy, wrote, "The remedy for speech that is false is speech that is true." This is the ordinary course in a free society. And this is important because in my submission, I will be making a case for a free society, but with a role for you and I to combat misinformation. He proceeded to say the response to the unreasoned is the rational. To the uninformed is the enlightened. To the straight out lie is the simple truth. That's how a free society fights misinformation and disinformation. It matters to civil society that it should participate in the fighting of misinformation, because civil society is concerned first and foremost about its very existence. Some of the fake news, the misinformation, the disinformation has targeted the civil society organizations leading to such things as we have been debating in the recent past, like the NGO bill, the PVO amendment bill, where you will find a lot of fake information, misinformation about civil society being circulated, engendering fear on the part of the state and necessitating sometimes, as we see, an undemocratic and completely unnecessary response to crack down on civil society. It matters that civil society should fight misinformation, because misinformation can cause inter-ethnic, political, and other forms of violence. My brother Ubabundlov has already referred to instances in South Africa where misinformation is used to mobilize for xenophobia against, in particular, Zimbabweans. It matters to civil society to fight misinformation because it can cause the targeting of certain groups. It can reduce electoral, political, and civic participation. When people are told that it doesn't matter whether you cast your vote or you don't, decisions are already taken, are already made, people sit down and don't participate electorally, politically, in terms of civic. Misinformation can lead to disputed electoral outcomes, even where there is no need for that. Because misinformation, as we shall deal with some instances going down, tends to create information silos and echo chambers. Information silos where a group of people of a similar disposition and thinking tend to belong to a same WhatsApp group, isn't it? You circulate certain information, you misinform yourselves to an extent of believing that a certain organization doesn't even exist. And I'll give examples. There are instances where you meet supporters, say, of ZANU-PF, who believe there is no opposition in Zimbabwe, because they've created echo chambers and information silos where they misinform each other. Similarly, you find instances where supporters of the opposition genuinely believe that ZANU-PF is dead, and they get surprised when ZANU wins, and they dispute the outcome because they were conditioned to think that ZANU does not exist anymore. That's the danger of misinformation. Misinformation can lead to serious violations of human rights. It can increase polarization, making it impossible for consensus and convergence even on the most important national issues. It can kill democratic debate because because of misinformation, it gives birth to what I call information nations. We belong to separate information nations. Beyond being Zimbabweans, I have a group that I belong in where we share certain information, and we have become a nation on ourselves, separate from others. And others also create their own silos, and it becomes impossible to reach a state where you can reach a solution-seeking convergence on issues. The sources of threats, before I talk about the intervention of civil society, some have already been referred on, are actually political parties themselves and their campaigns. It may be the government itself, and this is very pertinent in Zimbabwe. It can be commercial actors, it can be the media itself, it can be other non-state actors. All those can be sources of misinformation. So In terms of the causes of misinformation, for instance, UNESCO has identified 3, but there are many. This tends to be generic in context. The collapsing traditional business models, being the first one. The second one is the digital transformation of newsrooms and storytelling. The third being the creation of new news ecosystems. What is happening because of the transformation of the way we use to get the news, where we will read a newspaper, and today we are just getting those news posted into our WhatsApp groups and so forth, and we have reduced the ways of verifying the story. And in fact, the authors of the story may not even be a credible somebody, but we have no way of auditing that, verifying that, and so forth. Those become very, very important. Additionally, the digitalization of the sources of media or information in this particular instance has led to the desensitization because of distance. Umuntu olele endlini egubuzele uyathumela istory esiyingozi ebantwini. The desensitization because of distance, you can label and damage the reputation of a person without giving due regard to the consequences. Because you are distanced from the person, you won't meet them. We are ones what we are never going to meet them. There is also the devaluation of the notions of truth. The good doctor has already said that. There is also this instant access to bulk information that becomes very difficult to process. The previous speakers have already discussed the issues of what makes it easy for such information to circulate. So let me go straight to the role of civil society. The role of civil society, first and foremost, is what we have already been told of earlier on, what SITE is doing. SITE is doing what civil society has to do to combat misinformation. There are a number of such interventions, among which are, and I won't be discussing at length some of these, forensic, what we call digital forensics, fact-checking, awareness campaigns and information dissemination, advocacy to governments and other similar platforms, advocacy to platforms that such as WhatsApp, Facebook, and so forth, the digital and media literacy, which is why we are here today, networking, collaboration, coalition building, and of course, international cooperation. Civil society should engage in grassroots mobilization. We need to go out there, as SITE is doing, to communities and mobilize them into information hubs, into information centers, through which they can bounce stories that they receive and get the verification of the story, whether it is true or false. That's a very brilliant idea. Whenever they get information, they get what they think might be a good story or even a false story, they bounce it against a trusted network like SITE with independent fact checkers. That is civil society. As well as with social media platforms, in order to identify, respond to, and build the resilience to misinformation, using what we call closed media groups, or what information is posted there with a view to verifying its authenticity. It is important also in terms that civil society drive digital and media literacy, and raise awareness and disseminate information, educate people out there to strengthen their critical thinking skills, and empower citizens with credible alternative sources of information. So it's not enough for civil society to go out there and train people and strengthen their critical thinking skills, but it has to go beyond and give them alternative sources of information. It is important also that civil society engages the platforms that supply us with that information. In other words, if you flag a particular source of information time and again, you need to communicate that with the responsible platform through which that information is being communicated. There is an advantage, for instance, in being in WhatsApp, but there is a danger in the sense that it is tightly encrypted, and all of us know that, isn't it? So it is not even easy to know where the information came from. So you need to engage as organized civil society on that one. It is important also to identify the misinformation narratives and the assets that are being used for that, whether it's political parties, it's non-state actors like civil society organizations. But beyond that, it is important also, as much as we launch this media and digital literacy, to form partnerships as civil society. You allocate yourselves responsibilities. Certain organizations focus on WhatsApp, while others focus on Facebook, others focus on different platforms. And you monitor that on a day-to-day basis, because as we shall see, but I won't touch very much on that one when we get to fact-checking, because I see somebody is going to be dealing with that. It is important that you do fact-checking on real time, isn't it? You can't do fact-checking after 2 months or 2 weeks, the story is done. It is important that as soon as the story comes out, it is fact-checked. And for you to be fact-checking that one, you have to establish yourself as the alternative and trusted source of news. In terms of reducing, we have also as civil society to reduce or eliminate information silos and echo chambers where people don't interact. In other words, we have to interconnect generations with each other. Abantu abanenwele ezimhlophe njengami lani abancane, working together. You see, the advantage that I have over you is that I'm already in your future. I'm already where? In your future. You are coming to where I am. I'm already there. Now, so you get here, I'm already gone. Saying in your future again. So I will always know something you don't. We call that wisdom. And so the interaction amongst the generations will help to eliminate information silos and echo chambers. And civil society can play a very critical role in enabling that. So that we have this cross-pollination of ideas, of views, so that people can debate bangesabani just because they come from different political parties. One of the things that has enabled an environment of misinformation in Zimbabwe is the political information silos, where people belonging to different political parties can't even greet each other in the streets in Zimbabwe. So people tend to run away. You are afraid of the information that they are going to give you. You don't want to hear them. And maybe they run away from you because they don't want to hear you talking about democracy. And then it kills the intersection of information. So we need to destroy those information silos and echo chambers. I have already spoken to the issue of the literacy. The literacy, my brother earlier on touched on it, but I'm going to expand also on that and emphasize the issue of human rights literacy, which is within the context of information, that all of us have the right to access that information, and not only that information, but to the freedoms of expression and of speech. We need to equip our people with news literacy so that they are able to scan through. When I read, unlike some of us, I've heard people who say, "Mina kangibali chronically vele." That's dangerous. Uyingozi ungabanjalo. Very dangerous. Because you need all information. You need all information. Watch ZBC. I know it's a lot of praise and worship, sort of, but you still have to watch it in order to bounce the other side's views with it. And that way you are able to counter misinformation. We need, of course, to equip people with advertising literacy and even computer literacy itself, people having access to information themselves. And having said that, it's important to engage the likes of the service providers, so that the data bundles that they sell to us are not just WhatsApp, but they enable us to cross-check information ourselves. If I get a story that is posted and I'm told that its origin is on Twitter, I must be able to visit Twitter and see the story for myself. So that's very, very important that civil society does that. To equip citizens with the ability to check fake news and see whether anything is true or false in that. Civil society also needs to engage the state. The state also, first and foremost, being the source of fake news itself or misinformation, as it were, and the state also as a regulator. Remember the judgment that I read, the judgment of the Supreme Court of the United States. We want to keep a free society. We want to have a democratic society. But we cannot have that unless civil society is actively involved in countering misinformation, so that it is not the responsibility of the state to do so. Because if the state is the one that deals with that, then at the end of the day, you are going to have, we have this law, the Data Protection Act. Do you know that? They will tell you that the reason, if you go to the memorandum of the Act, it is basically saying that it seeks to enable access to information, but also to counter misinformation. But if civil society is actively involved, it will minimize the involvement of the state in the management of information. So civil society, in winding up, has a responsibility in engaging communities, in mobilizing communities, in sensitizing communities, in deepening their understanding and strengthening their critical thinking skills, so that people can judge whatever information comes in, instead of when the story comes in. I think the button is WhatsApp, you click forward. Anything that comes in before you even read it, you forward it. That is dangerous. First read the story. and seek to understand whether that story measures up to the truth, so that you are not yourself the source of misinformation that we are trying to combat. So it's important. I have received stories from people, and the person says to me, "Kanti bathini khona lapho?" After sharing the story, he expects me to read it and then share the contents of the story with him, because he hasn't read the story, but he decided to forward it to people. So we can't do that. Civil society needs to engage, to inform people. Go out there into communities. Even kithi esima phezu kwesihlahla to access network. We need that capacity. Civil society must engage the platforms of Facebook, of Google, and so forth. It must enable people to decide whether photos, videos, and all those things are true or false. And I have already indicated quite extensively also on the fact that what SITE is doing is actually the model of how civil society should be engaging on these things. Go out there into communities, mobilize them into information communities, so that they have the capacities and they have access to information. I thank you.